At 65 years old, my own son had me arrested for trespassing. On the porch of the house I built with my own two hands. My name is Walter Grissom. I didn't find out. I was losing everything from Derek. I found out from a police officer, standing on my front lawn, telling me I had 5 minutes to leave the new owner's property. 3 months earlier, I owned a house. I had a family. I had a name people respected in Millbrook, Ohio. Now I had a duffel bag, a folded blanket, and a phone with no service because I couldn't pay the bill. Let me back up. I spent 38 years as a machinist at Halden Manufacturing. My wife, Carol, passed 6 years ago from cancer. After that, my son Derek and my daughter Renee became my whole world. I gave them everything I had. College tuition, wedding gifts, a down payment on Derek's first house. I never once said no to either of them. 2 years ago, my knees gave out. Arthritis bad enough to need surgery. I couldn't stand on the factory floor anymore, so I retired early. On a pension that barely covered groceries some months. That's when Derek showed up at my kitchen table with a plan already printed on paper. "Dad," he said, not even looking up from the documents, "you shouldn't be alone in this big house anymore. Renee and I think you should sign it over to us. We'll handle the mortgage, the taxes, all of it. You'll never have to worry about money again." I trusted him completely. He was my son. I signed without reading past the first page. 6 weeks later, a moving truck pulled into my driveway. I stood on my own porch, the one I'd repainted every single summer for 20 years, and asked the movers what exactly they thought they were doing. That's when a squad car rolled up behind the truck. "Sir, I need you to step off the property," the officer said, one hand resting near his belt. "The new owners called about a trespasser on their lot." "This is my house," I said. "I've lived here 30 years. "Not according to the deed, sir. I need you to leave or I'll have to take you in." I called Derek right there on the lawn, hands shaking so badly I nearly dropped the phone. He picked up on the 6th try. "It's just business, Dad," he said, flat, like I was a coworker he barely knew. "Renee and I needed the equity. You can stay with one of us for a while, okay?" A while turned into 2 weeks at Renee's, where her husband complained every night about me cluttering the guest room. Then it turned into nothing at all. Derek stopped answering my calls. Renee said she was too stressed to talk. I had $300 in my checking account and nowhere left to go. That first night on a park bench, the cold cut through my old jacket like a blade. I lay there thinking about Carol, wondering what she'd say if she could see me now. I thought about Derek's voice. "It's just business, Dad," and how a man could ever say those words to the father who raised him. I didn't know it yet, but the next morning, a stranger was going to sit down beside me on that very same bench, and what she said to me would change everything. The next morning I woke up stiff and freezing, the sun barely over the trees. An older woman sat down on the other end of the bench, holding 2 cups of coffee. She handed one to me without a word, like it was the most natural thing in the world. "You looked like you needed it," she said. Her name was Marlene Okafor, 62 years old, a retired schoolteacher, a widow herself for almost 5 years now. She told me she walked through this park every single morning, rain or shine, and she'd noticed me the night before, sitting alone with my duffel bag long after the streetlights came on. I don't know why I told her everything. Maybe because I hadn't spoken to another human being in 3 days, who wasn't telling me to move along or asking me to leave a property. I told her about Derek, about Renee, about the house I'd painted every summer, about the police officer standing on my own front lawn. She listened without interrupting once, her coffee going cold in her hands. When I finished, she said something I'll never forget. "Walter, greed makes people forget who fed them." She invited me to stay in her late husband's old workshop behind her house, just a small room with a cot, a space heater, and a window that looked out over her garden, until I got back on my feet. I told her I couldn't accept charity from a stranger. She looked me straight in the eye and told me it wasn't charity. It was decency. And decency shouldn't be rare enough to feel like a gift. I stayed 3 weeks. Marlene helped me find part-time work at a hardware store nearby, since my hands still remembered tools even if my knees had given up on me. Slowly, carefully, I started saving money again, dollar by dollar. Then one afternoon, Marlene came home holding a folder, her face pale as paper. "Walter, I think you need to see this." Her nephew worked at the county records office. Out of pure curiosity, she'd asked him to pull the paperwork on my old house. What she found wasn't just a family deciding to sell a father's home. Derek had taken out a loan against the property months before he ever asked me to sign anything over. He'd already poured that money into a failing investment with a college friend. Signing the house over to him was never about equity. It was about covering a debt he never once mentioned to me. He needed my house to save himself from a hole he had dug entirely on his own. Worse, Renee had known the whole time. Text messages, forwarded by accident during the records request, showed her writing to Derek weeks earlier. Just get Dad to sign. He won't ask questions. He never does. I sat in Marlene's kitchen holding those printed pages, feeling something inside me crack open. It wasn't just betrayal, it was calculation. My own children had planned this, discussed it, timed it, while I was still recovering from surgery and grieving my wife. I thought I knew pain. I thought losing the house was the worst of it. I was wrong. Because that same evening, my phone rang. It was Renee. And when I answered, she wasn't calling to apologize. She was calling to ask me for money. I let the phone ring 3 times before I answered. Dad? Renee's voice was sweet, syrupy. The same tone she used to use when she wanted extra allowance as a teenager. Hey, listen, I know things have been weird, but I need a favor. Marcus and I are short on the mortgage this month, and I was wondering... Renee, I said, cutting her off. I know about the loan Derek took out. I know why he really needed the house. And I know you told him I wouldn't ask questions. Silence on the other end. Long enough that I almost thought she'd hung up. Who told you that? She finally asked, her voice sharp now, all the sweetness gone. Doesn't matter who told me. What matters is that you and your brother planned this. You didn't just let it happen. You made it happen. Dad, it's not that simple. It's exactly that simple, I said. You watched me lose my home. You watched a police officer threaten to arrest me on my own lawn. And you knew the whole time it was never about taking care of me. It was about covering Derek's mistake. She started crying. But I'd raised 2 children, long enough to know the difference between real tears and convenient ones. These felt convenient. I'm still your daughter, she said. And I'm still your father, I answered. But apparently that only matters to you when you need something. I hung up. My hands weren't shaking this time. For the first time in months, I felt something close to steady. Marlene had been sitting across the table the whole time, quietly, not listening the way good friends do. When I set the phone down, she slid a business card toward me. My nephew's fiancé is an attorney, she said. Elder law, mostly. Cases exactly like yours. I think it's time you talk to her. Her name was Priya Anand, and she was sharper than any lawyer I'd ever dealt with. She looked over the papers I'd signed, the loan documents, the timeline Marlene's nephew had pulled together, and she leaned back in her chair with a look that told me she'd seen this story before. Just never quite this cleanly documented. Walter, what your son did borders on elder financial exploitation, she said. The loan taken before you signed, the pressure to sign quickly, the fact that you weren't given independent legal advice. We have real grounds here. It took 4 months. 4 months of paperwork, depositions, and one deeply uncomfortable mediation session where Derek sat across the table from me and couldn't look me in the eye. He tried to argue it was a misunderstanding. Priya laid the loan documents on the table, one by one, until even his own lawyer stopped defending him out loud. In the end, we reached a settlement. Derek didn't have the money to pay me back outright, so the house was sold to a new family, and I received a significant portion of the equity, enough to buy a small 2-bedroom place across town. Not the house I raised my children in, but mine. Fully, legally, undeniably mine. Renee never called again after that phone call. Derek sent one email months later, apologizing in the kind of vague way that apologizes for nothing specific. I didn't respond. Some bridges you don't burn on purpose. Some bridges just quietly stop existing, because nobody bothers to walk across them anymore. Marlene and I still have coffee every morning, though now we drink it on my new back porch instead of a park bench. She never asked for anything in return for what she did. She just saw a man freezing on a cold night and decided that was reason enough to help. I think about that a lot now. How the people who share your blood aren't always the ones who show up for you. And how a stranger with 2 cups of coffee taught me more about family than 65 years of raising my own children ever did. I lost a house. I lost the version of my children I thought I knew. But I gained something I didn't expect at 65 years old. The clarity to know exactly who deserves a place in my life, and the strength to close the door on anyone who doesn't. Some inheritances aren't about money. Mine was about learning finally what real family looks like.